Greetings, leaders. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. I am your host, Jason Muhammad, founder of JM Leadership Consulting. Today, we're discussing 3 mindsets of next generation leadership. Do you know what it looks like? Do you know if you even have those hidden leaders in your company right now? Do you know how to develop them? Let's talk about that today. Hey, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. So today we're talking about 3 mindsets of next generation leaders. These mindsets that it takes to address and achieve, right, and accelerate in this COVID-19 era that we're actually in, that has produced not only a health pandemic, but also a financial or economic pandemic, as well as the unemployment filings have been rising and declining, and really depending on what area that you're actually in as it relates to, how the numbers will look. There's quite a few research, optimization places or, research resources that you can use to get this data and information, right? And then there's also some unemployment. There's also some challenging, information that you can also get from these different research resources. One such is DDI, Development Dimensions International, that, I have gotten a lot of information from as it relates to, challenges of leadership. And as I've stated in several of my podcasts, right, that they did a research, they did a poll of over 25,000 leaders, right, with 2,500 organizations, with 2,500 HR representatives, right, with all of the genres of the baby boomers, the millennials, the Gen Xers, right, all involved in this research. And what they've come up with is that there were 2 great challenges that out of the 10 challenges that were identified from leaders, but 2 of the great challenges, 60% of the respondents stated that retaining top talent was their number 2 challenge. Their number 1 challenge, 64% of the respondents stated that their number 1 challenge from these leaders was developing next generation leaders. And so one of the things that I wanted to help us to discuss, right, I've done, I think it was episode 5 with the 5 traits of the 5 leadership traits, of a high potential employee on my podcast. And I've talked about, with the 5 leadership traits, right, of a high potential employee, or the 5 leadership traits of a high potential employee. Today, we're talking about the 3 mindsets, right, of next generation leaders. And so that's what we want to talk about today. So we started off with, you can have all of the strategies, in the world to develop, next generation leaders. But there are 3 things about strategy that you need to really understand. Number 1, Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You got to pay close attention to the culture of your company. And not only that, but the culture that you want in your company, the culture that you desire in your company, because whether you know it or not, you actually are partly, ultimately responsible for the culture, in your organization. But I'm going to talk to you to why I said partly responsible for the culture of your company, right? And then the second thing about strategy is strategy is nothing without effective leaders to execute these strategies, right, that you may come up with, design, and discover. So strategy is nothing without effective leaders to execute it. And then number 3, only 14% of CEOs have the leadership talent to execute their plans. So those are the 3 things that you need to know about strategy, right? People are, talking about let's do the strategy. Let's come up with the strategy. to retain our employees. Let's come up with a strategy to develop our next generation of leaders. But 3 things about strategy. Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Strategy is nothing without effective leaders to execute, and only 14% of CEOs have the leadership talent to execute their plans. So leadership development should be top priority, right? It should be top priority. And you can see how leadership development, or the lack thereof leadership development, has affected, companies. You can go to like Glassdoor. Glassdoor, is a resource for companies to be able to use to see, the revenues and the revenue streams that have been generated throughout a company, how that company's product is doing, what is their bottom line, that they have made, how they're looking, for each term, right? And so you can get that data, free. I mean, through Glassdoor, you can punch in these companies and you can get a snapshot of how these companies are actually doing. So again, from DDI, right? So they have what companies need to know from their human resources department. And we're still talking about the 3 mindsets of next generation leaders, but we want to lay a base for this, right? We want to give you some data of why this is, in fact, important to take a look at and study. Because if you are a CEO or a frontline manager, you're right, or a C-suite manager, like a chief human resource officer or chief operations officer or a chief financial officer, developing next generation leaders, someone to carry the torch throughout the generations, right? Someone who is going to carry it to the next generation is very important. Now, I got to make a statement about that here, that there's no specific age requirement to be considered next generation leaders. You just got to have the 3 mindsets of next generation leaders to be considered a next generation leader. So we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes here. But in terms of quality, HR professionals did an assessment, and the assessment of their organization's leadership development programs were a lot lower than the leaders' assessment of their leadership development programs based on this research done by DDI. It says that 78% see their leadership career planning and pathing systems as only moderately effective or worse. 48% do not use the information from the assessments and simulations to make leadership hiring and promotion decisions. 50% do not have well integrated and strategically aligned leadership development programs or processes. 65% do not believe their leaders have high quality, effective development plans. 35% do not have a program to develop their high potentials. And 45% of those that do don't measure the effectiveness of these programs. So again, people are spending money on programs, but not measuring, if they're getting a ROI, their return on investment with these development programs, right? And so to just be able to put on paper or in reporting that you spent some money to, purchase or develop a leadership development program, but you're not measuring the effectiveness of it, that's you really are not caring about, number one, the development of your people, and number two, the futuristic outlook of your company, right? So let me share with you some of the results of not caring, results of not caring about, that type of development, or some of the results of not caring about, measuring the effectiveness of these programs. Poor processes to select frontline leaders, right? And so 80%, guess what? 80% of employee turnover comes as a result of bad hiring decisions. 80% of employee turnover comes as a result of bad hiring decisions. Like, why are you hiring people? right? I remember watching Simon Sinek talking about, hiring processes, right? And he was saying that, would you adopt the person that you hired as a member of your family? Right? And if you wouldn't, see, you got to look at your company not like a family, but it is a family, right? You got to look at your company as it is a family. And so when you're hiring people or interviewing people, you got to think to yourself, would you adopt this person into your family? Why? Why do you say that? Why do you think about that? Right? When I heard him say that, that brought so many thoughts to my mind of how you really gotta, so if you're bringing this person in, and if you would adopt them into your family, you're not only loving this person, but you love your family. And you as a CEO person, right? You love your company. And in order for you to love your company, you gotta love the people, right? You gotta love the people. So the financial cost of, having bad hiring decisions, can exceed 2 times the salary of the position you actually hired the person for. I want you to hear this. The financial cost of a bad hire can exceed 2 times the salary of the position of the person that you actually, of the position that you just filled. And then here's the last part of it is that 5 in 6 HR managers are dissatisfied with the results of their high potential programs. 5 in 6 HR managers are dissatisfied with the results of their high potential leadership development programs. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about frontline leaders, the challenges that they have today, and then we're going to go straight into the 3 mindsets of next generation leaders. Thank you. Greetings, leaders. I'm here to talk to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and or computer. Now, how convenient is that? Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast, too, with no minimum listenership. So it's everything that you need to make a podcast in one place. So do me a favor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I look forward to seeing the greatness within you. Hey, welcome back. So thank you so much for coming back with us with the 3 mindsets of next generation leaders in today's episode of Leadership Is Podcast. So as we're going to continue talking about frontline leaders today, the challenges that they're faced. Again, we're seriously wanting you to consider, right, that the top challenge of leaders today is developing next generation leaders. Now, you have to keep this in mind that next generation leaders, there's no age requirement for this, right? The next generation leaders are really just going to be based on the 3 mindsets that leaders have to have. Now, of course, these 3 mindsets are going to be found within your leadership development program. In your leadership. It's going to be found in your departments within your company, and it's going to be found, in some of the positions, that people hold in these departments in your company, right? So we want to talk about that today here. But again, frontline leaders today face real challenges. Listen to this: 49% of leaders want more coaching from their manager. See, millennials, as we talked about in our last podcast, right, of how to increase employee engagement, millennials are not so much looking for a job for the payout, right? Or for the salary, that's good, right? That is an excellent perk, getting paid, right? But the amount of money is not, really a top priority of a millennial, right? Millennials are looking more for more growth and development opportunities within the company. That means more to them than the salary. So you got to remember, the baby boomers are the ones who are coming out of, the children from those that were of the Great Depression. And so money and security was a top priority for them, right? And so not growth and development opportunities, but having a secure job was, a top priority for them. But for millennials, it is really growth, and for Generation X, right? It's really for those older of the Generation X, it's really growth and development opportunities. It's really an environment of coaching and training. That's what they're looking for. That's how you increase your employee engagement, is having an environment of growth and development. So again, 49% of leaders want more coaching from their manager. But guess what? 57% of leaders want more external coaching. They want coaching from outside of the company. Right? They want someone to come in with a fresh perspective who's not been tainted by what they judge as maybe even a toxic culture. And they want, a development program that is based on your company's KPIs. They want a program that's based on your company's core values and mission statement, but just not tainted with the toxicity of the culture that has been developed within that company by, the lack of accountability that's been held by some employees by the leadership. That's one of the worst things a leader can do, is to allow a bad employee to get away with being a bad employee in the presence of a budding good employee. That's the best way to kill the budding life of a good employee, is by allowing them to see you tolerate the behavior of a bad employee, right? So again, but guess what though? 60% of frontline leaders have never had a formal mentor. So again, if you have, as we've stated in the beginning of here, that 80% of employee turnover comes as a result of bad hiring decisions, right? And the financial cost of a bad hire can exceed 2 times the salary of the position that you have. Well, okay, that's something to look at, right? But again, at the same time, you got to look at the fact that 60% of frontline leaders have never had a formal mentor. So again, you got to add in the coaching and mentoring component when you're dealing with developing next generation leaders. But I want you to look at 3 mindsets that next generation leaders have. Before we go there, I want to share something with you from Jacob Morgan, author of the book, The Future Leader, in a LinkedIn article that he wrote on August the 6th of 2020. Jacob says, think like a futurist. From the 140 CEOs he interviewed from his latest book, The Future Leader, this was the #1 skill they identified as being most crucial. The skill is about thinking in terms of possibilities and scenarios instead of just picking a single path, he says. You need to constantly ask yourself a series of 4 questions. And when you're making decisions, those questions are, why might this happen or not happen? What else might happen? What do I want to happen and how can I make it happen? And number 4, what factors might influence why this will or won't happen? So that brings me to the 3 key mindsets of next generation leader. Because if you're going to be addressing those questions or thinking like a futurist, then the first mindset, right, that a person has to have, or your next generation leaders have to have, is the adaptive mindset. We are living in a time of crisis, and crisis produces a change or a transition, right? So it produces a change, and a change is transitioning from one mental or physical or state of being into another state of existence or being. So we're in that transition right now. We're in a transition time of that is creating a new norm, right? Where you can see people going into a bank with a mask on, coming out, and no one is chasing them, with a gun. This is a new norm, right now. So the first mindset that next generation leaders have to have is the adaptive mindset, right? The adaptive mindset, to be able to adapt, through the changes of transition. And this is, in fact, a soft skill that can be taught. My company, JM Leadership Consulting, we teach, mindset. We teach adaptive, right? We teach these soft skills to not only budding and emerging leaders, but also to employees who are on the cusp of being fired. We teach these things because we want to save companies money. So in an adaptive mindset, right, there are 4 things that you're going to find in the adaptive mindset. Number 1, there's leadership. You're going to find it in these areas, and this is what it's going to look like. So the adaptive mindset is there's going to be leadership. You're going to display leadership. Number 2, they're going to display it in their communication, right? Number 3, they're going to display it in their professionalism. And then number 4, they're going to display it by having a growth mindset. The difference between having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset is, as Carol Dweck has it in her book about growth mindset, and we talk about it where growth mindset is, a fixed mindset is being, but a growth mindset is becoming, which means that there's always room for growth. There's always room for improvements. There's always room, right, to be a little better tomorrow than you were today. So again, the first mindset of a next generation leader is the adaptive mindset, being able to adapt to the changes that are taking place. There are many people that are going to be coming back into these companies, and they're going to find that, their manager or supervisor has been furloughed or even, removed from the company altogether, right? They may even find that coming back into the industry and find that their local store, a local company of this chain, even, right, of this franchise has been closed permanently. So, but they still want to be faithful to the program and to the company or to the industry. So they go find another, store or go find another company, right, within the industry. And so, again, you may even have some that were not furloughed or were not fired who remain on the company, but now the managers have been relieved, or you find yourself in your company, you have room now to promote someone into a leadership position, right? And so now this person may have what is called survival guilt. We talked about this in our last episode, where they stayed employed, but a friend of theirs who they felt may have been more qualified or who they felt needed the job more than them may have gotten furloughed or fired. So now they have survival guilt, right? So again, the mindset of a next generation leader is that of one of adaptation or adaptive. They adapt to the times, right? And then number 2, with proper adaptation, using the leadership, communication, professionalism, and a growth mindset, they grow to the second mindset, which is the innovative mindset, right? So as they are adapting to the changes, to the transition that is taking place, now they're becoming more innovative, right? Which means they're coming up with or featuring new methods of how to do something. And once again, this has nothing to do with an age requirement. This has everything to do with the mindset. Right. So you can be a Generation Xer, you can be a baby boomer, you can be a millennial. Right. But again, it deals with being innovative. Right. And the innovation comes by a way of the adaptation or the adaptive mindset. right? And so when one is adaptive in their mindset, right, or featuring new methods, they will have new methods of onboarding or hiring new employees. As we've talked about with Simon Sinek, who talks about, how you hire someone and you want to, hire someone this person that you're going to hire, in other words, right, would you adopt them as a family member? If you wouldn't adopt them as a family member, then maybe you shouldn't hire them based on, a high resume or, an interview, success, right? Because when you are bringing them into your company, your company is your family. And if you love your family, then you should love every family member that is a part of your family. So if you are interviewing someone to hire, you are adopting a new family member. And you have to look at them as such, right? Because again, they're going to come in expecting, some love from you as well. There is, of course, a honeymoon period that every job has, right? Everyone is nice to the new employee to a certain point to where, the niceness, that's called the hedonic adaptation, right? The hedonic adaptation means that which was new has now become our norm. Therefore, the newness has worn off. So we get that part, right? But again, with an innovative mindset that comes by way of the adaptive mindset, you'll find it in the onboarding, in the hiring, process, in the interview process. You'll find it in the digital literacy. Right? You'll find it in your digital literacy that's in your company. You'll find it in technological development in your company, right? They'll be innovative in the technological development in your company. They'll even be innovative in the artificial intelligence in your company, not just robots, as it relates to artificial intelligence, but also in the software, right? So the very least of artificial intelligence will be what is described as algorithms, right? So they will be innovative in the algorithms, discovering how numbers and behaviors match and how you can actually forecast, X, Y, and Z based on these numbers and behaviors. And then number 3, the third mindset is, of course, the connecting mindset. The connecting mindset is a system or the systems that are developed using the innovation based on the adaptive mindset. So again, to recap, the 3 key mindsets of next generation leaders are the adaptive mindset, the innovative mindset, and the connecting mindset. So if you're going to grow, and you should be growing your next generation leaders, these are the 3 mindsets of your next generation leaders that you should look for. Thank you. Thank you so much for enjoying another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. Today we discussed the 3 mindsets of next generation leaders. And as we discussed, we're not talking about an age requirement to be considered next generation. The 3 mindsets we discussed were, number 1, the adaptive mindset, which of course adapts to the changes of transitions, which is a soft skill. Number 2 was the innovative mindset, which was of course a hard skill, and what it does is have innovative or new ways and new methods to address the changes of transition. And then number 3 was the connecting mindset, which links everything together using systems. So we work with emerging leaders, high potential employees, and students to develop and embrace a growth mindset for leadership. If you would like for us to do a presentation or keynote your next event, please contact us, jason@jmleadershipconsult.com, or visit our website, www.jmleadershipconsult.com, and we will respond promptly. Please subscribe to our podcast using the Anchor app, or you can go to anchorfm.com, or you can use Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Leadership Is. Please follow us on social media using Twitter at LeadershipJM. Also, Facebook and Instagram is JM Leadership Consulting. And always remember, leadership is influence and service.